Tetris is an addictive puzzle game that provides continuous fun and mental stimulation. The game does not need any tutorial or explanation. The objective is to score as many points as possible by clearing horizontal lines of blocks. It requires the players to rotate, move, and drop strategically the falling tetrominoes inside a playing field at increasing speed. The lines disappear when they are filled with blocks and have no empty spaces. A tetromino is a geometric shape composed of 4 squares connected at the edge and not the corners. There are 7 tetromino shapes in Tetris. To get better at Tetris, you need to master the essentials of maintaining a mount, leaving a well open, and scoring a Tetris by clearing 4 rows at once. All of this requires a masterful balancing act between leaving room to maneuver and utilizing the appropriate pieces to score. There are more strategies online to master and improve your game, like hyper-tapping, tucking, and spinning. The game could potentially last forever, and fitting the puzzle pieces together is satisfying. Stack the tetrominoes too high and the game is over. Tetris was created by Russian scientist Alexei Pajitnov while he worked at the Russian Academy of Sciences in Moscow. Alexei modified his favorite game, Pentominoes. Pajitnov named the game Tetris by combining the Greek word tetra, meaning 4, and his favorite sport, tennis. He developed the first version of Tetris on an Electronica 60. However, Pajitnov wanted to make the game available for IBM PC. He approached colleague Vadim Gerasimov to rewrite the entire program for an IBM-compatible version. Gerasimov added color to the tetrominoes, multiple levels, and the ability to save your high score. Pajitnov and Gerasimov began distributing the PC version of Tetris amongst friends in 1985, and by 1986, Tetris had spread like wildfire throughout the Soviet Union. Popularity reached outside the Iron Curtain, launching an epic battle for the rights to Tetris. Politics, unclear definitions, and bad translations impeded the race to acquire the rights to Tetris. In 1986, Robert Stein, owner of the British software company Andromeda, was first to ask about licensing Tetris. He communicated with Pajitnov directly using a telex machine, but the game was not his to negotiate. It was government property. So a vague telex message to keep the conversation open left Stein believing he had the go-ahead to peddle Tetris. So he initiated contact with Microsoft Maxwell in the UK and its American affiliate Spectrum Holobyte in the US. Microsoft published the first commercial version of Tetris in 1987, using much of the game's Russian origins for packaging and background graphics. In 1988, Spectrum Holobyte released Tetris in the US. When Elord director Alexenko noticed that Andromeda was selling rights that it didn't actually own, Elord, coached by Hank Rogers, added an amendment to define what a personal home computer was to the original telex message agreement. And in doing so, Robert Stein was hoodwinked into negotiating a proper licensing deal with Elord, which basically voided most of Andromeda's rights to Tetris, and in a chain reaction, everybody else. Hank Rogers had entered the race when Spectrum Holobyte subleased its right to Hank Rogers' company, Bulletproof Software, which planned to sell Tetris in Japan, without realizing that Microsoft had also subleased the game to Atari, who planned to sell it not only in America but also in Japan. Hank Rogers had brokered an exclusivity deal with Elord, and so Nintendo eventually won a court case which denied its rival Atari the rights to publish Tetris at all. Finally, Hank Rogers had also brokered a deal with Nintendo to create a version of Tetris for the company's handheld console, the Game Boy. Let's put it this way. When all was said and done, the amendment to define the terms personal home computers handed Hank Rogers and Nintendo the rights to Tetris on all platforms. So in 1989, the game was bundled up as a pack-in title for the launch of a new Game Boy system. In 1991, as the Soviet Union was being dissolved, Elord was turned into a private business. Tetris Company Inc. was formed in 1996 by Hank Rogers and Pajitnov. In 2005, Elord sold its 50% of Tetris trademark to the Tetris Company for $15 million. The Tetris Company is the exclusive licensee of Tetris Holdings, the company that owns Tetris rights worldwide. As of 2010, Tetris games have been ported to over 65 unique platforms.
Tetris is a simple game where the player's objective is to clear these blocks, get as many points as they can, and avoid stacking the blocks too high. I guess you could say the enemy of the game is the top of the board. If the Tetris blocks reach the top, that means it's game over. From a deeper viewpoint, however, the enemy of the game is the player themselves. As the player continues on in the game and the levels get higher and higher, the player begins to run against time, speed, and their own reflexes to turn the Tetris blocks fast enough to get in the best position that works for the player, to organize the chaos they have created for themselves. This is why a game without any points of identification, Jules 2001, can be so intriguing to the players because all they have to focus on and compete is with themselves. The futility of Tetris and its endless waves create a challenge that players are more compelled to pay attention to compared to a game with an end goal. They're putting themselves in the game and creating an art piece by stacking these blocks together, while also trying to plan ahead and get the highest score possible. How can such a simple game reach such levels of popularity compared to all the more complex and aesthetically beautiful games that come out today? It all comes down to human psychology. According to the Tetris website, humans are drawn to these addictive puzzle games because it capitalizes on the brain's joy in getting things done. They enjoy the sense of satisfaction they get when they line everything up in a perfect row and clear it. Tetris creates a Goldilocks effect on people's natural love and enjoyment of puzzles. It provides the right amount of distraction and uses just enough brain power to keep players engaged without feeling bored.
Today, Tetris has many different versions, such as Tetris Effect, which is what I'm playing now. Now each version has its own twists. For example, if you've ever heard of Tetris 99, that's a battle royale game where 99 people will play Tetris and compete for the number one spot. I mean, that just shows how Tetris's solid gameplay and addictive premise make it a game that spans generations. And really, it does all this without a narrative. Jesper Jewell discusses whether or not video games can tell stories, which personally, I believe to be the case given modern examples of games like Detroit Become Human and Life is Strange, which focus on storytelling over compelling gameplay, yet engross gamers nonetheless. Now Jewell argues that games share parallels with stories, like games have problems that lead to solutions, games have protagonists and antagonists, which means that games can tell stories and to me, fit in with modern media like movies, TVs, and books. In the case of Tetris, however, this might not be the case, because you can only get so much story from stacking blocks on top of each other. Now, Tetris is specifically mentioned in Jewell's counter-argument when talking about one of the key components to a story, which is relatability. Now, most stories feature anthropomorphic things like humans or animals that people can actually somewhat relate to or at least understand the thinking of, which is very important to storytelling. I mean, imagine if Harry Potter was acted by a piece of wood. I don't think the movies would have done as good. Many people will find it hard to relate to Tetris given a lack of anything anthropomorphic at all, but this doesn't make Tetris a bad game.
I think that while games that tell a very compelling story are very important, especially in terms of contemporary gaming, that doesn't mean that less story-driven games don't have value. Gaming is a very personal experience, and no two people play and enjoy games in the same way. Simple arcade-style games are usually associated with the earlier days of gaming, where coding complex stories into a game was almost unheard of and nearly impossible with the technology of the time. Unlike the cutscenes and the dialogue of present-day games, lore was usually established through the packaging of a game, or the game manual if there was any lore at all. The way that games have evolved to tell inventive stories is a reflection of the rapid advancement of technology since the mid-20th century and the first video games. While narrative-driven games have left many positive marks in pop culture, I think that nowadays people forget that a game does not have to have the best graphics or storytelling in order to fulfill its purpose as a game. While people are entitled to their own taste, I feel like many tend to overlook the beauty of a simple game that exists to entertain by engaging the player with nothing but their own skills against a simple objective like in Tetris. I think that games that make a statement about the state of the world through their stories are very important culturally, as are any stories of that nature, regardless of the medium. But I think that there is also something to be said about games like Pong, Pac-Man, and Tetris that were so compelling to a large portion of society to the point that they still have a cultural presence half a decade after their release. The way that the gaming industry preserves and refreshes classic games while also doing innovative things with new games year after year is a reminder that all that really matters in gaming, from casual players to the professionals, is that people have fun while playing. To some, that might be a deep dive into the lore of a very heavy story-driven game, and to others it might be simply turning off your brain and playing a classic game like Tetris that requires just basic skills that almost any human has. Thank you for watching our Let's Play of Tetris, and stay tuned for our discussion questions after the presentation.